everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome from across this gorgeous planet. We are one church, many paths, one mountain, where our mission is what Barbara Marx Hubbard and Dr. Mark Goffney call the planetary awakening in love through a unique self symphony. And together, we declare that the last day of the old face of evolution is honored as the first day of the new face of creation. I am Christina Amelong, the co-executive producer of One Church along with Kirsten Zohar, and I am delighted to be here with every one of you today. I welcome all the new people. Please do share that you are new in the chat box. We want to hear from you. I see Ashley and Jolly, Junior and Lori and Gerard. Welcome, welcome. When you do chat, make sure to check your chat settings that they say all panelists and attendees and not just all panelists. Use the chat function to say hi, to let us know where you're from, and to resonate the Dharma. In One Church, we are connected, we are whole, and we're expressions of the entire process of creation. We are activating a new humanity, and we are awakening as a new species. Homo, amor, the fulfillment of Homo sapiens. We are a church, a synagogue, a mosque, a temple, a zendo. We're all of it. No one is excluded. Everyone is included. And we come together to attune to the evolutionary impulse awakening within us. Wow, right? Welcome home, everyone. We're so delighted to be with you today, really, truly, in week 180 of One Church. Let everyone know about One Church. We are doing this primarily through word of mouth. Barbara Marx Hubbard talked about each of us having a family of 10 here in church. I do love that idea, each of us tending our evolutionary family. Join us in our weekly One Church work table on Zoom to help us grow church. Put your email in the chat box and I'll email you. Our One Church work table is on Tuesdays at 12 Pacific, 2 Central, 8 European time for one more week. And it's awesome. Leadership around church is truly a sacred opportunity. On YouTube, we are One Church, many paths, one mountain. On Facebook, we are facebook.com, onechurch.world. And I don't think we're on Facebook today. After church, we'll send you an invite to invite your friends and family, and what a time it is for that, right? So please do forward that email right after church to the people you want to see here. Spend time on our new community website, onechurch.world. On the top of the home page in the menu or the bottom of each page, you'll find our membership link. With that, I give you a little bit of what to expect over this next hour. We begin with a Dharma recap of the teachings in last week's church. Then Dr. Mark Goffney sets our intention, and then David will resonate the code that we're working with. After that, we move into prayer, followed by our sermons for the day, and we close at the top of the hour by bringing everyone on for our goodbyes. The entire Dharma recap is a string of direct citations from Dr. Mark and Barbara from the past week's church. What I do is find the most beautiful sentences that Dr. Mark or Barbara shared, and I bring them here as a recapitulation. Every week for several years, Mark wrote what he called evolutionary love codes. Mark and Barbara studied the codes together, often comparing them to Barbara's 52 codes for conscious self-evolution. These codes grew out of Dr. Mark and Barbara's radical commitment over 100 collective years, crystallizing the new story of humanity into these sentences. Quote, evolving the course of consciousness and culture, which is the source code of love, unquote. Each church is a standalone, and every week's church builds on the week before. One church, many paths, one mountain is radically committed to telling the new story. So here goes the Dharma recap from last week's Dharma. There are no foreign viruses. Go viral with outrageous love. Who are we in this moment? Who are we when we become afraid? How do we make friends with fear? At the very core of reality is a desire to touch and to be touched. We want to touch each other's hearts, each other's minds, each other's souls. We want to touch every part of this planet. How do we come together and hold hands at this time of social distancing? We have to physically isolate at these particular moments in order to join hearts. We have to physically quarantine in order to come together. Many people that are alive in this moment may well not be alive in a month or 2 or 3 from now. We have to social distance. And in these acts, we actually realize that we already are a unique self symphony of planetary awakening in love. The coronavirus is a result not simply of this contagion of germs. It is also the result of the failure of the contagion of love. That's not words. It's actually the truth. There are no foreign viruses. We're one world and we're holding hands around the world. And at a time of social distancing, we're closer than close. Our hearts are more than naked. We're here at a time of crisis, which is a dress rehearsal for the larger crises that actually lurk at the door. And we lay it all on the altar of evolutionary love because we're here to reclaim love as politics, love as religion, as it's only a politics of love that can respond to the coronavirus. And a politics of love is not about the stock market. It's about no one being left outside of the circle. There is no other. There is no us versus them. That is an illusion. We are all part of the larger story, the story of life, emergent, here, alive. We feel each other, and that leads to our ability to have a mutuality of purpose. Let us not be infected with unlove, and let that unlove incarnate, that unlove express itself as contagion of the most tragic form. It's time to stop business as usual. It's time to actually enact a metaphysics of the future. Every individual around the world carry this social virus of outrageous love. We're here on this earth because evolution has a trajectory. Evolution has a purpose. We are not an accident. Bring everything. Evolution operates through surprise within the context of a larger movement, and it's a movement towards ever greater and ever deeper and ever wider intimacy. With that, I invite us to more deeply enter into the holy and sacred space of one church. And I turn my word to you, beloved Dr. Mark.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. And I want to begin, right, just let's just love each other madly. I'm going to ask who's ever, I think, Haley, I think you're not muted. Whoever needs to be muted. Suzette, take care of that for us. Thank you so much. You're awesome, Suzette. Welcome, everyone, okay? Right? Let's just feel this together. And I want to clarify something in that beautiful and gorgeous Dharma recapitulation. And this is where I want to start this week, because we really need to model, how do we be in this time? Who we are is who we are in this time. Who we become is how we transform and deepen in this time. And we need to model what we should be saying as spiritual beings, having a human experience. We need to model what we need to be saying politically, geopolitically. We need to model what we're saying economically. We need to model what we're saying medically, right? How do we actually be the most gorgeous humans that we need to be at this moment in time? And I want to start, friends, and I want to do this so gently, right, with what we need to be doing as spiritual teachers. So when we say that the germ is not merely a pathogen, I want to be really careful. The germ is a pathogen, right? The virus is a formal structure that has obviously real, definitive medical implications. It's a formal embodied structure, and it's spread as a formal embodied structure. And we don't mean in any sense that some abstract failure of love on the planet went and in some woo-woo way created a germ. That's not the case. That's a huge mistake. Right? That's not the claim that anyone should be making. And I want to get that really clear. That's really important, right? When prophets of the old churches would say people are suffering because they sinned, that was a great tragedy. And that was a way, it was an egoic move. We're suffering. We seem to have no control. Let's say that we sinned for punishment, because that's a way of regaining control. Does that make sense, everyone? Right? So it wasn't a pious move. It was a control move. I can't sit in the mystery. It's too painful. And I understand that. Right? And I'm with you. We're together, and the mystery is often painful. And we're going to talk about what it means to sit in the mystery. But the control move is a desecration. Now, that same move to gain control by saying I sinned. Now, why does saying I sinned and therefore I'm punished give me control? Because then I can stop sinning. Right? If I did something to cause it, then I've regained control, because I can stop doing what I did to cause it. And therefore, the equation should mean it won't happen anymore. So that's a human move to gain control in the face of the mystery. Now, it's a legitimate move when it comes to science. We got to be really careful not to adopt fundamentalist forms. The AIDS virus happened because God was punishing homosexuality. God forbid. That's a desecration. We've got to be very careful. So this pandemic is not the result of some sort of abstract failure of love. That's not what anyone should be saying. It's not what we're saying. So we're going to model precisely what we are saying. So that's number one. But number two, the New Age world is, of course, making the same version of that mistake as it always has. The New Age world says something like, you're suffering, you attracted it into your life. Either you personally attracted it, you created that, you created your suffering, right? And I can't tell you how many across the world popular New Age forums there are that are saying the precise same thing as the medieval religions, just dressing it up in a different language. So if the medieval religions talked in terms of sin, the New Age world talks in terms of the law of attraction. You've attracted it into your life. That's why it's there, which means that if you're suffering, you created it. No, and no, and no, and no again. That is to say, now I want you to, going to take this slow. There's a place, and we'll talk about it, for transforming fate into destiny. There's a place for taking suffering and turning it into transformation. Let's put that aside. We're going to get there. But you never, ever, ever have a right to say to a person or to a planet, the reason you're suffering is because you sinned, or the reason you're suffering is because you attracted it into your life. Those are both great violations. And I want to stay with me. I want to get this so deeply. I want to give you another example before we go more deeply into this. And I'm sharing this with you because so much has come across my text and my desk right over the last week and into my heart from people writing from all over the world. How do we relate to these things? Right? How do we understand? Did we attract this? So let's be really clear. When we encounter suffering, we hold the person who's suffering and we pour love into them, and we pour medicine, and we pour ventilators, right? And we pour supply side systems that are working, and we do everything we can to prevent medical overload, and we do a full-on containment strategy, not just mitigation, but actually, right, a strategy which moves to utterly flatten the curve with a complete and total global lockdown for a short period of time, and in order to flatten the curve completely to prevent further suffering. And then we hold the people that are dying. And I want to talk about that in a couple of minutes, but that's what we do. And the one thing we don't do, right, is to figure out who to blame. And who to blame is always the other people. It's the Democrats or it's the Republicans, right, in America. This is not a time for demonizing, right? This is a time for actually understanding that no one, literally no one's left out of the circle. And there's no us, them. In the New Age, and here, Terry Nelson, my friend Terry, here I need to critique this New Age moment, particularly because it's important, because it's flying all over the internet. The New Age does the same us, them move, it just changes who the them is. Okay, there's no them now. It's one world. It's one love, right? It's one heart. And we're together in this. And together we rise, right? Can you feel that, everybody? Together we rise. We're holding hands. Let's hold hands, right? Literally around the world, holding hands. One love, one world, one heart. And I want to talk more about that. But first, I want to just show you an example. We're going to play 30 to 60 seconds of a clip that a whole bunch of people sent me this week. And the clip is about, let's thank the virus. Because the virus can cause all this transformation. So we want to thank the virus.
Thank you for shaking us and showing us we are dependent on something much bigger than we think. Thank you for making us appreciate the luxury we lived in, abundance of products, freedom, health, and realizing we were taking it for granted. Thank you for stopping us to make us see how lost we were in the busyness, not having time for the most basic things. Thank you for allowing us to put aside all our problems we thought were so important and showing us what is actually important. Thank you for stopping.
That's a disaster. We don't thank the coronavirus, friends. Do you understand that? Right? This is precisely why spirituality, in its new forms that are so important and so needed, has so little impact. Is it true, is the premise of this clip true, that transformation can come out of this catastrophe? Of course it's true. Is it true that there's deep understandings that we have when our lives are radically stopped? Of course that's true. But you don't thank the coronavirus, do you understand? Right? Let me give you an example. It's absolutely true that the state of Israel was in part emergent from the ashes of the Holocaust, where most of my family was killed. But we don't thank the gas chambers. Do you understand? Because people are dying, right? 12,000 people were gassed every day in Auschwitz in 1944. Yes, the state of Israel arose from it. We don't thank the gas chambers. Andrew Sullivan wrote a beautiful column talking about what emerged from AIDS. Andrew Sullivan's a great writer, and he's an AIDS activist, a gay man very, very prescient and good insight into the structures of society. So Andrew writes about the good that emerged from the AIDS epidemic. That's absolutely true. There is good that emerged from the AIDS epidemic, but we don't thank the AIDS virus as people are dying all around us. Let's just understand this, right? When Gal Gadot, Gal, love you, sweetheart, love you, sister Israel, we live right near each other in Israel, but goes online and sings with uber wealthy friends, Imagine, right? In this moment, whoa, let's slow it down for a second. 70%, let's just take the United States as an example, but it's true throughout the world. 70% in the United States, ostensibly one of the wealthier countries in the world, 70% of the United States lives from paycheck to paycheck. 12,000 workers were just laid off yesterday from various airports with no severance, meaning no ability to actually pay for basic necessities in this next month. No thank you, virus. Italy, doctors, right now, this week, today, yesterday, doctors are deciding who should get the ventilator. Right? Wow. And if you notice, friends, notice there's almost no stories, right, available. I searched last night about individual cases of people dying. So there's a virtual blackout on actually individual suffering. There's number 571. There's X amount of cases. Do you notice that, friends? It's trends and it's statistics and it's economic implications and it's stock markets and it's mega analysis. And that's all important and that needs to be done. But friends, outrageous lovers, people are dying, right? And what we're understanding is that we're living in this moment where this death is caused not as a prophetic statement, not as a new age statement, not as a fundamentalist statement. What we said last week is we need to look at the fact pattern. You get the distinction? The fact pattern that created the pandemic. The fact pattern that created the pandemic is a failure of intimacy. But that's not, stay with me really closely because I want to explain that. Because we got to model good sense making here. We're living in this moment where we need to be doing sense making. And there's no central sense making. There's no top-down sense making that's happening, which is both good and disastrous. It has two dimensions and we're going to look at it. We need to do decentralized sense making. Does that make sense, everyone? So we need to make sense of this, right? And when we make sense of this, we need to understand what actually is happening here. So there's a global intimacy disorder that expresses itself, excuse me, thank you, on multiple levels. So for example, Wuhan, China, right? In Wuhan, China, there are open wet markets. In the open wet markets, dogs are killed in front of you and you eat them because you're poor. It's not because, as I've seen some expressions on web, let's honor Chinese culture, right? Where we kill dogs in front of people and it's part of the culture. No, the same way we don't honor the travesties, let's say in Indian culture, in which widows are burned after their husband dies. No, there are universal principles. Right? There's a new story where we share a universal ethos. We don't burn widows because they did it in Indian culture at a particular time. No, we actually are moving from this pre-modern moment to a universal set of shared principles, right? And let's be really careful here. And we don't honor the Chinese wet markets, right? Which are brutalizing animals. I mean, brutalizing. There was an incredible interview with Jane Goodall, who the great animal activist, right, who worked with animals her whole life, with Anderson Cooper. One of the great brutalities of this century, right, is the concentration camps, literally, that we put animals in order to fatten them to eat our minute of lamb chops. But actually, the Chinese wet markets are entire populations that are poor, that don't want to be eating live bats. And actually, that is, to the best of our scientific knowledge today, and the fact pattern, right, everybody? That's where it came from. We split off these poor populations. We split off the wet markets. We split off the suffering of animals. So the fact pattern, you get that, everyone? The fact pattern, to the best of our knowledge, of how this catastrophic pandemic was created was a failure of intimacy. That's what we mean. That's an entirely different thing to say. Now, paradoxically, and there's little beeps coming in on my computer, so I apologize for that. There's no way to turn off the sound. Okay, so stay with me, okay? Stay with me. So when we make a clip saying, thank you, coronavirus, that's also a failure of intimacy. You get that? When uber wealthy people that are not actually threatened month to month in any way make this kind of imagined song, which actually is split off from the actual suffering of real and vulnerable people all across the world, and there's such an obvious disconnect from the genuine pain happening, that's an intimacy disorder. So as Italian doctors, as we mentioned a few minutes ago, are choosing between who to give a ventilator to because the coronavirus is infecting both people, we don't thank the virus. Do you understand? So let's distinguish between turning fate into destiny. That's absolutely what this moment is about. We have to turn fate into destiny. And thanking the virus, right? And placing someone who happens to be our political foe outside of the circle. This is not a time for commodifying the virus. This is not a time for politicizing the virus. This is a time for actually not restoring intimacy, but creating a new emergent level of intimacy that the world's never known. So let's try and understand this deeper, okay? But before we go deeper, let's just pause for a second. Let's just pause with me for a second. Cha, right? I want to just give you one more example, and then we're gonna play Amor. David's gonna resonate the code, and we're gonna go deeper in together. It's so good to be with you. It's such an honor to be with you, right? We're trembling before Goddess. We have to hold every person. And again, I want to say it again, right? Literally, there's a blackout today on stories of individual people dying. But the people who are dying are people. And every death is a tragedy. And every death that we take for granted before the coronavirus is a tragedy. And every new death that's unnecessary is a tragedy. And every death that's caused by this global intimacy disorder is a tragedy, right? Death is a tragedy. Now, death's not the end of the story, and we're going to talk about the fear of death. We have an enormous amount of information, hardcore information, right, about death. So we're going to talk about that also, because there's a fear of death, right, that's playing among us, and we need to talk and speak directly to that. But right now, we have to do one thing and one thing only. I want to give you two examples. There's a book in the ancient text called the Book of Job. And Job is about a man who suffers. And Job's friends are fundamentalists in their new age. He has three friends, and they come, and each one explains to Job why he's suffering, why he's attracted into his life, right? Why it's sin for punishment, why it's right. And God, Spirit, infinity, the infinity of intimacy appears out of the whirlwind and says, no, fuck that. That's a direct biblical quote, maybe, right? No, when someone's suffering, let's hold suffering in our arms. Let's feel your pain. Let's feel your joy. If this is a time for any of us to transition from the world, let's do it with so much depth and so much transformation and so much grace. And let's hold the fear and let's tremble before Spirit. Right? Wow. I'll tell you just one more example. Wild story about a man named Moses who lives in the old texts. And there's this Spirit, which we'll call God, who speaks to Moses in a book called the Bible. And God says, I'm going to take the people out of Egypt. It's the story of Exodus. Remember the movie Spartacus? That's another Exodus story. It's the story of Exodus, of leaving Egypt, of rejecting the status quo. And God says to Moses, I've got a plan. I'm going to liberate the people and transform history. And then somehow the Egyptian taskmasters oppress, hurt, make the people suffer more. And Moses turns to God and says, I don't care about your plan. I don't care about the transformation that you're going to bring. People are suffering. I will not stand for it, God. I will not participate in your divine plan, even if it's to make things better. And God says to Moses, you're my man. That's right. That's what I want to hear from you. You get that? Any theology that deadens our sensitivity to pain is not kosher. Whether it's a New Age theology or a fundamentalist theology. When we see pain, we live in a world of outrageous pain. The only response to outrageous pain is outrageous love. And the essence of that sentence, which is the core of the beginning of a new story, which is what we desperately need today. Because in order to create global action, which is utterly necessary more than ever, because the nature of catastrophe at this moment in time, at this phase shift in human history, and this catastrophe is a dress rehearsal for what's to come. The nature of catastrophe is we can respond to it if we're one world, if we're one heart, if we're one love, if there's concerted global action, if there's a concerted global response, and especially when that response has to be radical and transformative. And we can get to a concerted global response when we have a shared story. And that shared story begins with an understanding of what love means in the world, but not as a New Age idea, not as a fundamentalist idea, but as the structure of the universe. But let's go to the beginning of the sentence. We live in a world of outrageous pain. The only response is outrageous love. Let me go to the beginning of the sentence before we talk about outrageous love and about amor, which we will. But we live in a world of outrageous pain. The only response is outrageous love. That's what that sentence means in the Dharma. It means you can't respond by thanking the virus. You can't respond by saying it's sin for punishment. You can't respond with the law of attraction. All of those are ways of looking away. We can sometimes step closer to each other, and we should. This is a moment of physical distancing and radical social intimacy. We can sometimes step closer. Sometimes, even in a relationship, we have to step back and create our space, but we never look away. Right? We never look away. Does everyone understand that? We never look away. So I want to do two things now. And I know it's a little bit hard, okay? But I want to ask you with me not to look away for a second, because that's our practice. I want to first play just 2 minutes of a clip from Wuhan, China. We played a piece of it last week. I just want to play 2 minutes so that we're not looking away. So we actually see this is actually the structural fact pattern place where the causation of the pandemic began. And from there, if you can come back to me, we'll go to David, we'll go to Amor, and we're going to lift this up. We're going to lift this up. We're going to transform this. We're going to be the change together. We're going to tell the new story. Does everyone get it? I just want to go last sentence. In the old world, let's say there was China and there was London. So the only connection between the two was Marco Polo, right? In other words, it means there was no connection. Marco Polo was so unique because he connected these worlds that had nothing to do with each other. And if you weren't on the Silk Road, the trade road, you basically didn't realize that these two worlds had any relationship to each other. Today, and the Chinese have done such a fabulous job in their own way of trying to deal with this beautifully. And there's no foreign virus. This is not a Chinese problem. It's a world problem. There are no foreign viruses, right? It's one world, it's one love, it's one heart. But the fact pattern is that it began through a global intimacy disorder. We split it off. So in our world today, in our one world, there's no more locality. There's no more splitting off. What the mystics knew was true, that it's one world and one love and one heart, is now true in the structure of reality. It's geopolitically true, right? It's economically true. It's true in terms of our currencies. What happens when in Saudi Arabia, there's a devastating fundamentalism that feels violated and oppressed and doesn't have a story which is post-Western Enlightenment to actually be able to work that. So a bunch of people get on a plane and fly low into Manhattan and cut off the phallus of the West, and we have 9/11, this tragic moment where 4,000 people die, right, in one morning. That's not okay. Right? Do you understand what happens though? When you split off something in one part of the world, it affects you immediately. When we split off the wet markets that we all knew about, but didn't do anything about, then what happens is it has instant effect. We are colliding with each other in the world. Every structure of consciousness is colliding with each other. So either we choose the new story of the intimate universe that we're going to talk about today, or we'll be shattered by the unbearable intimacy of a planet imploding on itself. So I want to just ask us as a spiritual practice, we're going to go to joy today. because there's joy in the middle of pain. And we're going to laugh because we laugh with one side of our mouth and we cry with the other. But for a moment, I want to invite us so gently to actually do the spiritual practice of not looking away. So let's take a look for 2 minutes, 2 minutes of practice, right, at the open wet market. Right, this is from Indonesia. Take us inside. So we've got to embrace those animals. We've got to embrace every person suffering. We have to embrace the populations that don't know how to get basic necessities. So there's not my basic necessities, there's our basic necessities. So here, let's see if we can find this together, okay? Let's see if we can find this together. Crisis is an evolutionary driver. So David, I'm gonna ask you to resonate the code for us, and we're gonna try and take this code, take it into this reality, and really understand what we can do in this moment of time and how we can actually hold everyone, hold ourselves, transform, be in joy, be alive, and actually respond to the invitation of this moment to be better than we've ever been before, more beautiful, more good, more true, more gorgeous. We can do this, and we're gonna do this together. So we're holding hands. David, take us inside to the code, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much. You challenged me and all of us to confront the outrageous pain of this world. So as I read the code, let's feel our reaction, our response. How do we sit with the mystery? How do we feel the pain? Crisis is an evolutionary driver. Our crisis is a birth. Every crisis is a crisis in intimacy. The ultimate crisis is a global intimacy disorder. The only way to heal the global crisis is not a restoration of intimacy, but an evolution of intimacy, the emergence of Homo, amor, unique self symphony, evolutionary intimacy. And I turn my word back to you, Dr. Mark.
This is about, of course, this clip. Thank you, David. Of course, this clip is about survival, right? The failure of intimacy is, why don't we have, for everybody in the world, the basic possibility to eat food, right, that is actually sanitized, right, and safe? That's where the intimacy disorder is. And of course, right, that's our responsibility. And then, so there's levels, right? There's levels of a failure of intimacy, right? Everyone in the world should have enough food to get through the month. That should not be a privilege we have to earn. We shouldn't have a global economic system in which I don't have the basic right to health and to existence. And we have the prosperity available to us so that we can actually change the very source code of who we are. So let's see if we can kind of find this, right? Crisis is an evolutionary driver. So there's an invitation here. And what we want to talk about with such urgency, but with such ecstasy, meaning beside ourselves, we said last week, right? We're beside our separate selves. We're going to go to a place in these next few minutes which are so unbearably beautiful, even as we hold the unbearable pain. And so we want to find this new story. And at the center of the story is amor. At the center of the story is the sense of love as the genuine reality of cosmos. Okay, so let's give us amor, which is the clip we play every week. Let's just feel into it. Let's just feel what amor feels like, right? Amor, you got us inside? That's our chant every week. Amor, it's insides are lined with love. Take us inside.
Amor, 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 amor,
Around the world, amor, hold the hand, amor, amor, in the chat box, amor.
amor, 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 amor,
Around the world, let's sing it out loud wherever you are. Sing it out loud. Amor. Amor, 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 amor. Sing it out loud around the world. Amor, its insides are lined with love. So here's a moment. Christina Almon, take us inside. Right? This is the holy and the broken hallelujah. And we're about to take off. Okay, we're about to take off in 2 minutes, and we're going to go inside all the way, and we're going to find the response, the evolution of intimacy, the new story of identity, the new universe story that is actually the transformation that's emergent from this moment. Crisis, our crisis is a birth, Barbara, right? You said it so often. Crisis is an evolutionary driver. Not that the reason the pandemic is happening is in order to bring these results. We don't know that. That's mystery, right? Not that we're going to give explanations to why people are suffering. No. But here's what we do know. We know that when we don't turn fate into destiny, when we don't turn suffering of so many of us or of the few into a triumph for the all, then the suffering is in some sense lost. There's nothing worse. There's nothing more tragic than to waste a tragedy. So our utter ethos in this moment is to turn fate into destiny, is to take this moment of catastrophic risk that we've known has been coming. We've been talking about this moment for a decade in different ways, for 2 decades, for 3 decades. Here in this forum, one church, many paths, one mountain, for 3 years we've been talking about this moment. And this moment is catastrophic risk, and it's a dress rehearsal for existential risk. So the invitation is love more than we've ever loved before. We're going to love it open. We're going to bring our holy and our broken hallelujah in this moment. We're going to have conversations that we've never had before. This is a moment when we can actually be with each other. We can be intimate with each other in a way we've never been intimate before. Right? In the place of physical distancing, we can open our hearts and talk about the things that have never been worked out. Forgive that which has never been forgiven. Transform that which has never been transformed. It's an invitation to know who we are in this moment and to be, right, the best, most gorgeous version of ourselves that is actually our true nature and our essence. What a gorgeous invitation. And, right, as a planet, as a one world, we're going to up-level. We're going to transform. We're going to be something so gorgeous. We're going to usher in a possibility Because what is spirit? Spirit is the possibility of possibility. From this crisis, we're going to invite a possibility that's unimaginable. We got to turn the dystopia into utopia, because that's what evolution does. Crisis is an evolutionary driver. When there's an oxygen crisis on Earth and the one-celled organisms that populate the Earth, bacteria, are being destroyed in the first epic oxygen plague, what happens is there's a transformation. There's a new structure of intimacy, because every crisis is a crisis of intimacy. And that new structure of intimacy takes time. And ultimately what's birthed is multicellular life, a new form of being together when there's a crisis in a relationship between two people or in an organization, right? It's always a crisis of intimacy. It's how do we be together? So we have to learn to be together in a new way. And that's what we're going to do. And we got to bring all of us. Part of intimacy means nothing's left out of the circle, no part of us. So I want to go to a balcony in Italy for our holy and broken hallelujah, which we sing every week, our hymn. And let's hear it now from a balcony in Italy. Outrageous depth and outrageous beauty in the midst of outrageous pain and outrageous love. So Christina Amelon, take us to that balcony in Italy.
Sai che poi la musica non conta, passando per un fa non so, la tonica, l'armonica, il repentito scrisse alleluia, 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 forse c'è un Dio sopra di noi, per quello che ne sappiamo poi, non so nemmeno come si pronuncia, ma lucido ogni sillaba, non conta cosa recita, ma so che è adorabile, alleluia, 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 fatto quello che si può, non sento più, non toccherò, c'è troppa verità in ogni storia, ho perso mai, ma non guardo, Signore della musica, stringendo tale braccia, alleluia. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia,
Hallelujah, right? Hallelujah. Right, let's feel it. What's the news story? And let's understand the moment, friends. The only possible response to a catastrophe. And a catastrophe means something that was expected. Catastrophes are always predictable. We had SARS, right? And we had Ebola, right? We had respiratory ailments. We knew this was coming. We ignored it. Catastrophes are always predictable. Catastrophes always change the game in some essential way. And either we're lulled back and we go back to business as usual. There's nothing more tragic we could do now than to go back to business as usual. Or we actually evolve, something happens, right? Crisis actually becomes an evolutionary driver. Wow. And in this crisis, we said earlier, the one way to respond is global. There has to be a global response, and a global response only comes from a shared story of who we are. And so I want, with your permission, in just the few minutes that we have, I'm checking our time, I just want to tell you we're going to go a couple of minutes over time just to share with you, what's our story? What's our shared story? You know, I have some good friends around the world. We're talking about 3 ideas. And one is sovereignty. And by sovereignty, we would mean self-mastery. This is a moment for sovereignty, meaning to be self-mastering, to be self-responsible, to be not reactive. Second, we have to be discerning. We have to clarify. We have to cultivate discernment. And 3, we need integrity or impeccability, right? We need to be impeccable. We need to be aligned with our values. And I said to one of the friends, right, or part of the group that was talking about this late last night, early this morning, I mean, it's great to talk in that language, and it says an enormous amount, but it also, of course, and I understand the listening that it's speaking into, and it's important. It says so much, but it also says so little. Because actually, to have self-responsibility and self-mastery, I've got to know who I am. If I can't answer the question of who am I, who's myself? If there's not a shared narrative of identity, and by narrative we mean a genuine integration of the best interior and exterior sciences, so there's a shared understanding of who I am. If I don't have a larger context within which to cultivate discernment, a larger framework of understanding, if I don't know what my values are, how can I align with them? I can't have impeccability or integrity. I can't align with my values unless I have a set of values. And those set of values are not merely subjective. They're not merely social constructions of reality. They're not merely, as my friend Yuval says, fictions. No, there's actually genuine values. As Alfred North Whitehead said so beautifully, right? The universe generates value. What are the shared universal values that we can stand in, right? That are actually validated by the best sciences, exterior and interior? What's our notion of self that we can stand in? Okay, so let's see if we can just find this, and we can find this deeply, because that's what we need to do. See, when we're physically distancing, what we're doing is we're being by ourselves. And who am I by myself? Who am I when I'm not producing? Who am I when I'm not playing a particular social role, when I'm not wearing a particular mask? We need to begin to reclaim the essence of who I am, which is that I have value, that I am good, that I'm true, that I'm beautiful, that I've got a song to sing, I've got a poem to write, I've got a way of laughing, living, and being that's irreducibly valuable and needed by all that is, that I'm not dependent on my production. I'm not dependent on. Do you understand? Can we feel this together? We need a new story. And in the absence of a new story, what we've done is we've put in the absence of a new story 4 versions of a story that don't work. A success story, which is based on a win-lose metrics that creates the exponential growth curves and extraction models and fractional reserve banking that are the charade of society, which creates the fragile systems, which creates the undersupply, which creates all the possibilities of breakdown in this moment in time. So the success story, win-lose metrics, means I don't have genuine value in who I am, only if I've produced, which then generates this exponential growth curve, which then generates complicated systems that are super fragile, that break down. Right? That doesn't work. That's what we've been doing until this moment in time. Then we have a second kind of story. That's the romantic story. The romantic story is love is a human experience. I fall in love once or a couple of times. I might do it successively with a couple of people. And if I'm loved by that person in that particular way, in a way that feels like infatuation, that's love. Everything else, everyone else, it's weird to love other people. Right? Romantic love, we've exiled love to its human realm, number 1. And number 2, to a particular kind of love, an emotional experience of romantic love, into a particular kind of romantic love, the experience of infatuation. So we've thrice exiled love, right? We've made our story this narrow romantic story. Or 3, we have a personal hero's journey, which is the psychoanalytic working with my trauma, right? Working with my story, trying to turn my personal life into a triumph, which is very beautiful and often necessary, but it's too small. It's me as a separate self. It's me, the canvas of my life, the tapestry of my life is my separate self-existence. So it's this narrow hero story, way too small, doesn't work, inaccurate, isn't actually aligned. It's not backed by the universe. It's not actually who I am. That's the 3rd story. And the 4th story, friends, the 4th story is the victim story. When those 3 stories predictably don't fill us, we're left with the victim story. I'm a victim. I've been violated. So my story is in my violation. Now, let's understand. Those are the 4 stories we have. Then spirituality, new forms of spirituality come and respond to the inadequacy of those 4 stories and say, there is no story. Move into the timeless present, into your true self, which is beyond all stories. Okay, there's validity to that. The timeless time, the place, this place are important. They do live underneath our stories, but it's also insufficient because I actually feel that my life matters. I feel that my story is writ on the larger tapestry of life and love. I feel like I'm part of a larger whole. I feel connected. I feel that my sacred autobiography matters. So to be told, move beyond your story also doesn't work. So at this moment in time, as we're physically distancing, as we have to actually create a global response to pandemic, we need a shared story. We need not a restoration of intimacy, we said last week, but an evolution of intimacy. So here we go, 3 minutes? 3 minutes, are we okay? And forgive me, everyone, right? If I said something that somehow offended you or was hurtful or was off, you're right, I'm wrong. Take it as a given, okay? Apologize. Okay, but let's be together now. No distance between us, right? No distance, closer than close. Let's love each other more than we did yesterday. Let's be naked, but more than naked, right? Naked meaning naked heart, more than naked, right? Together. Okay, we ready? So we started with a sentence. We live in a world of outrageous pain. That means we don't look away from the pain. That's how we start. The only response is outrageous love. What does that mean? So outrageous love is the understanding that love is not weak, love is strong, right? Love is the force of allurement that holds reality together. And love moves reality towards more intimacy. That's what it is. Reality moves, the eros of reality itself moves towards ever greater intimacy. What does that mean? What does that mean? So let's go deep together, right? So outrageous love is not ordinary love. It's not merely romantic love, as beautiful and important as that is, but romantic love participates in this larger fabric of outrageous love, right? It's what Tagore meant when he said, love is not mere human sentiment. It's the heart of existence itself. It's what Christian mystic Dante meant when he said, love is that which moves the sun and other stars. It's what Alfred North Whitehead means when he talks about the eros that drives reality to create, right, ever increasing value. And value means ever deeper goodness, ever deeper truth, and ever deeper beauty. And yes, there is truth in the world. Yes, there are social constructions of reality, but underneath there's truth. There's shared truth and there's shared goodness and there's shared beauty and they're ever evolving. So we live in a world of outrageous pain. The only response is outrageous love. Outrageous love is the eros of existence, right? The love that drives all of reality to create more value. And more value means more intimacy. And what does more intimacy mean? So intimacy means, right, we're reaching for, feel intimacy inside of you. If you want to know what intimacy is, we want to use, and I want to introduce this, right, this anthro-ontological method. Anthro, human being, ontology for real. So go inside and find what's moving you. What's moving you is creative. I want to create, which means I want to bring parts together intimately to create a new whole. I want to create relationship with you. I want to be closer to you. I want to begin to feel shared identity with you. That's actually what moves us. The mysteries are within us. Ontology, the new story, actually lives in us. It's not going to be foisted upon us as a dogma. It's the self-evident truth of our lives that's ever, always, already true. It's the common sense when we do our sense making. This is a moment of decentralized sense making. We need to be able to do our own sense making. So we need to have a return to common sense, right? The sense that's in common to all of us. So all of us in this moment can go inside and find that within us that moves towards, that's desperate for more intimacy. I want to be more intimate with you. I want to be closer to you. What does intimacy mean? I don't want to fuse with you. I want to create a shared identity with you. So intimacy is, here's the equation. Intimacy is shared identity plus mutuality of recognition. We recognize each other. Plus mutuality of pathos. Mutuality of pathos means we feel each other. Plus mutuality of purpose means we have a shared purpose. You can only get shared, concerted global action, which is the absolute necessity at this time of global pandemic and challenge. If we can actually recognize each other, mutuality of recognition, we can feel each other, mutuality of pathos. And finally, that creates mutuality of purpose. We can actually act together. Wow. But let's stay close. Intimacy always moves uniquely. It's never generic. It's unbelievably important. Intimacy moves and loves uniquely. Intimacy is shared identity in the context of otherness. It might be relative otherness. There's an overarching seamless code of the universe. But we got to be really careful of authoritarianism. Really careful. We're actually using surveillance methods that actually create a police state to track and trace the virus. We're doing not only surveillance of what you press, but we're actually monitoring in certain places in the world. Israel just is deploying a method like this. Israel's now deploying a method used only to track terrorists, to track the virus. So if we put those methods in place, we got to be very, very careful that they don't become habit and remain in place. That's how South Korea and that's how China dealt with the virus. There's a tracking and tracing set of methods. So imagine for a second that you have biometric sensors, right, introduced as ways of creating health, and we're willing to give up freedom for the sake of health. Wow, that starts to get very scary. So we've got to be very careful here. At a time of catastrophe, we often move towards the authoritarian, right, towards martial law. We're looking for the strong leader. Yes, we need strong leadership. But what we need more than anything is decentralized sense-making, when we actually begin to self-organize as unique self-symphonies around the world. We're looking for new forms of collective intelligence. The future is about new forms of collective intelligence. And collective intelligences never, never disqualify the individual, the unique individual, the irreducibly unique individual. And that's how we begin to create this new story. Intimacy always moves towards you. You're a unique expression. That's who you are. It's who I am. Who are you? Right? Say it with me, friends, those of us who know it, right? You're an irreducibly unique expression of the love intelligence and love beauty and love desire. That initiated, that's the initiating and the animating eros and energy of all that is, that lives in you, Ariana, that lives in you, Nikki, that lives in you, Mark, that lives in you, Christina, that lives in you, right? In you, right, my friends? In me, in we, right? You're needed. You're unique. You're gorgeous. Never give that up. Intimacy always moves towards irreducible uniqueness. And as such, as an irreducible, unique self, you have a gift to give, a life to live that no one but you can live or give. And then we join hands as unique selves and we start doing collective, decentralized sense making. That's a new world. The only response we have to the world now is to actually be able to go inside, to claim our sovereignty, to cultivate our discernment, to be impeccable with our values. And what are our values? Our values are, friends, you get this? Our values are the irreducible dignity of every unique self in the world. Our values are every human being deserves a basic income. And so we don't need to make it a privileged right to have health and to have survival. We need a world in which, when we've obsoleted jobs, and that's happening in 20, 25 years, we actually turn to uniqueness. Our identity is, what's my unique gift, my unique creativity, the unique beauty, the unique goodness that's mine to create in the world? What does it mean to create new forms of social commons where we come together as unique self-symphonies? This is a moment for the planetary awakening in love through unique self-symphonies. This is not Chronos time. 20 years ago in a book called Mystery of Love, I had the privilege of talking about the distinction between Chronos and Kairos. Chronos is linear time. We're in Kairos time. We're in this time between worlds, or what we might call a time between stories. So imagine this. We're going to move to conclusion here. You're Da Vinci. You're in Florence. You're in the Renaissance. The Black Death, a plague, has just swept Europe. So what does Da Vinci do? And the 1,000 people around him and her, and we're all Da Vinci together. I'm not Da Vinci. You're Da Vinci. We're Da Vinci. We're all Da Vinci together. We're the unique self-symphony of Da Vinci, right? We're past the world of a top-down, right? It's a bottom-up, self-organizing universe. What does Da Vinci do? Da Vinci introduces a new story of intimacy. It's the story of modernity. It's the story of universal human rights, which creates new intimacy. It's the story of reclaiming the body, which creates intimacy with the body. It's the story of moving beyond the dogmas of the church and looking at the facts of science, which creates intimacy with reality. Did you get that? Every crisis is a crisis of intimacy. The Black Death, that plague at the end of pre-modernity, created, generated. It didn't justify. Every person suffering from the Black Plague, we've got to hold and love madly, and it may be me and it may be you. So it doesn't justify the Black Plague. It's not a, right? But it's the crisis has to generate a new birth. So with that new story of intimacy that Da Vinci told, there were cracks in the storyline. And those cracks in the storyline, it was a great story, but there were things missing, and precisely those cracks in the storyline created our present set of crises. And the crack in the storyline was every human being is a separate self. The universe is a mechanistic universe, right, which operates by clockwork. We lost the scientific quality of the intimate universe, a universe driven by allurement. We lost the reality that love is real. We lost the reality that I'm not a separate self. First, I'm true self. I'm part of the field of consciousness and desire. Then I'm a unique expression of that field. And that's my identity. That's my unique self. That's why we've got to save every person. That's why we have to do everything we can to flatten the curve. You know, I read an article yesterday, and with this we finish, by a really good writer, and he said, this is just catastrophic risk. There'll be a few million deaths, but we'll get through it. Really? Really? Did you just write that, brother? Sister? Really? A few million deaths? Really? Let's talk about one death. You notice, friends? Right? The stories of individual deaths are being blacked out. Right? I with you, let's cry together. Every person who draws their last breath. Let's cry together. Every person who can't breathe. Right? Let's cry together. Every person who's worried about, will I have basic necessities? Who in your circle needs help with basic necessities next month? Reach out to them and say, let me share some of my money with you, some of my income with you. Who doesn't have a place to live? Can we give someone a place to live in our house? Right? Can we actually break the global intimacy disorder? What is it, my friend? What is it, my friend, that you can do that I can do? What's my outrageous act of love? We live in a world of outrageous pain. The only response is outrageous love. What does that mean? It means that each of us is a unique configuration of outrageous love. We actually are evolutionary lovers. Right? That's actually our true identity. It's our best scientific identity. We're unique configurations of intimacy and desire. And we got to clarify our deepest heart's desire. And your deepest heart's desire, which is the desire of cosmos, it's the evolutionary impulse alive, awake in you. That desire is to commit your outrageous acts of love, interpersonally, to yourself, to love ourselves madly. That's why we want to survive, because we love ourselves madly, because we recognize the gorgeousness of our self-value. To love who's next to you madly, right? To love the parts of ourselves that we've split off, to love the person down the block, to share our resources, to share our quality of source, to come together and hold hands, right? To commit our outrageous acts of love, and to know that they make all of the difference in the world, because what's going to happen now is new forms of collective intelligence. And either there's going to be fascist, totalitarian superorganisms, negative, despotic, dystopian collective intelligences, or there's going to be organic, breathing, living, loving, superorganisms of outrageous love in which no unique self is lost, in which every voice is honored, a unique self symphony in which every instrument needs to be played, in which we know that every one of us is needed, desired, recognized, chosen, right? Adored, right? By cosmos. Oh my God. Oh my goddess. That's the new story. From that story, we can begin to understand what it means to be sovereign, to be self-responsible, right? To be self-mastering. From that story, we can begin to understand how to cultivate discernment. From that story, we can generate impeccability. Oh my God. So first, I apologize. I know I went over time. Thank you. Like mad thank you, like mad love, like beyond imagination. Beyond imagination, friends. So we have a Facebook page. I'm going to turn to Krista in a second, then she's going to go back to me and we're going to chant and sing together, right? We have a Facebook page, this awesome Facebook page where people can actually write their outrageous acts of love, right? Join us, be with us on Monday, tomorrow at 11 Pacific time. I'm going to join. Christina Kincaid's going to be on a plane, I think then, because it's an absolute necessity, right? She has to fly in order to get from one place to another to commit outrageous acts of love. So I'm going to join Christina Amelon in our writing group. It's going to be tomorrow at 11 Pacific time, right? Tomorrow. So we're going to write together. But there's also a Facebook page, and there's a way to join and a way to be part of this and a way to make this real. And on this Facebook page that Lady Krista is about to show you, I want to just invite everyone, write your outrageous act of love. Right? Commit outrageous acts of love and sing it from the rooftops. And let's generate this symphony. Oh my God, Krista, I turn the word to you with such delight. Yay.
Yes, thank you so much, Mark. Thank you. And since it's not business as usual, we have decided to open up our writing course for everyone. So it's not just for members of the church, but it's for everyone. And I have been joining the past 2 weeks, and it really blows open my heart. And I feel so held in feeling all the outrageous pain and choosing to commit outrageous acts of love over and over again. So again, this course is tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific time, and it's led by Christina Kincaid and Christina Amelon. And together there, we write our outrageous love letters. And we do this in 3 ways. We write outrageous love letters to ourselves, to our beloveds, to the goddess, to everybody in the world right now that is in pain. And we also write outrageous love letters about, and we tell the story of an outrageous act of love that we have committed, or we tell the story about an outrageous act of love that someone else has committed. So those are the 3 ways that we write our outrageous love letters. And we share them, as Mark said, on our Facebook page that I will open for you now to take a look together. This is our beautiful Facebook page, and all of the stories are shared here. As you can see, there's videos, there's people sharing their stories, poetry, pictures, everything is happening here. And it's important to know, if you go here, click on the community tab. It's here on the left on your phone. It will be above here, because all of you can post in the community page. And admins can only post on the home page. So if you click here, you will read even more stories. All of this is available for all of you for free. And we do want to ask you to step up even more and consider making a contribution to this one church, because all of us are volunteers and no one is receiving a paycheck, and all of the funding will go into growing our church together. We are creating this as a unique self-symphony, and we really need your help. So you can choose to make a one-time donation here, or you can also become a member with a monthly fee that you can choose yourself. And if you do decide to become a member, all of these 9 beautiful courses are available to you as well. And we are now actually in a study group, Awakening Your Unique Self, studying together every week. So thank you, and I hope to see you inside. And with that, I give my word back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Chris. In our last 2 minutes, right? So this is a church. It's an atheist center. It's a secular center. It's a mosque. It's a Buddhist center, right? The key is one world. The key is that we actually are evolution, right? I am evolution, and reality needs me. So I just want to ask everyone, just for the last second, let's go to the chat box. Who's willing to write that? I am evolution, or reality needs me, right? Evolution is in us. We are the leading edge of evolution. It's not out there, right? I am evolution and reality needs me. To actually write that and know that. Reality in the chat box is the center. Reality needs me. And there's nothing for you that I wouldn't do. Reality needs me, right? And my love is deep, right? It's actually not ordinary love. John Mackey, the beautiful man who's the chair of Whole Foods, right? When we first met, John said to me, love's not weak, love is strong. And we fell in love in that moment, right? Love is strong. Love is the strongest force in the world. It's an ontology. It's not a social construction. Oh my God, reality needs me, right? Who can get that? Can you get that for realsies? When I really get that, I wake up. Reality needs me, right? I can't do what you can do, and you can't do what I can do, and we can only do it together. There's only one question. The question is, oh my God, we'll see you tomorrow, right? At 11. And the question is at 11 Pacific time, right? And let's keep the chat box going. But one question, we finished with this question. Ready for what the question is? You ready? Ready? Ready to go? How deep is your love? Christina Amelon, that is the one question. Let's hear that, right? And let's blast it from the rooftops. We cry out of one side of our mouth. We laugh out of the other side of our mouth. We're creating a new shared source code, which can actually be languaged right into the very source code of existence. We're doing it together. It's Da Vinci, it's us, right? How deep is your love?